briefly, but the engineers read the game well and set a plan in place for future eclipses. Back at the site, with 15 days to go before commissioning, there was a stock-taking visit by the CEO of Adani Power, Vineet Jain. There was a lot riding on the plant. He had to motivate, supervise, and ensure completion if the company had to honor its contract with the state of Tamil Nadu.
I was not very sure whether we will be in a position to complete the balance work by the end of the month.
Roughly 120 megawatts of solar modules still had to get erected. Supervisors of every department were pushing their teams to keep up the pace. You could sense nervous energy on site at Kamudi. The last clusters of panels are being erected, connections made, system checks completed.
हमने इस प्रोजेक्ट को पूरा करने के लिए जी जान से एक कोशिश की है और हमको ऐसा लगता है जैसे हम दो यूनिट ऑलरेडी इसकी कमीशन कर चुके हैं और हमारे को पूरी उम्मीद है कि 31 मार्च तक हम बाकी 3 यूनिट भी कमीशन करके पूरा कर देंगे.
It's the morning of March 31st, and the team at Kamudi are still putting modules on structures, while engineers rush about checking these modules and making sure they are working. 360 megawatts is already being evacuated to the grid, and the remaining would flow out as soon as the state grid gets ready to receive it.
It's the proudest moment of my life. Together, we achieved the unachievable.
648 megawatt solar power plant is a big pride for all of us, is a big pride for Adani Group, is a big pride for Tamil Nadu, and is a big pride for this country.
For the entire Adani Group, March 31st, 2016 turned out to be a real good day at the office.
Everybody, and the celebration begins now! This solar power plant will light up the lives of millions of people. A true mega structure.
And a baby step towards the company's next target, setting up a solar park.
Dubai, a desert emirate, being shaped to become the leisure capital of the oil-rich Gulf.
We have the tallest building. We've got the greatest hotels. We are creating something very, very special.
A centerpiece of this new Dubai will be a shopping mall designed to outstrip all malls, with 1,200 shops and a slogan as brash as its scale. Everything you desire, completed to a next to impossible deadline.
The biggest challenge that we have to face is time.
People haven't done anything as this size this quickly before.
Riding on its success, a multi-million-dollar price tag, and the reputation of Dubai. The desert sun rises over the Dubai Mall, the city's shining new...
Have this financial sector arrears or debts, and we did not have the energy sector debts as well. These are new items that have come on board. So it is a matter of classification, and consistently we have said that this is how we present our accounts. Yes, the IMF may have their reasons for presenting it the way it is, but Mr. Chairman, it is part and parcel of our debts.
So is the IMF wrong? Are they wrong? Is the IMF wrong?
Mr. Chairman, it is a matter of classification and style, but provided we are doing the right thing by reporting it, and we have never failed to tell Ghanaians the quantum of the financial sector debt or the energy sector debts. We make it clear every time, so it is part of our total.
Added in the appendix, is that the understanding? So the IMF is now saying that added up as part of the public debt. Are they wrong with their approach?
Mr. Chairman, it is a matter of classification, and that is how we have classified our items consistently. And so that is the approach. But currently, as we speak, this is what, and this is how we show these items in our books. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, with your leave, Honorable, so in other words, you disagree as a matter of principle with the IMF approach?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is how we prepare our chart of accounts and our finances. And we have the IMF also saying that in their own way, this is how they want to classify things. They might be right from where they are coming from, but this is Ghana, and this is how we classify our chart of accounts. This is how we want to classify our debts. And I think it is acceptable. It is acceptable internationally, but this is how they want to do this. But we always, what I say is that we have never hidden any information. We put everything bare on the table. It's just that we make a distinction between the total debt less the financial service debt and the energy sector debt as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the approach is just the source of disagreement. That's it. Yeah. Are you done, Deputy Leader? Yeah. I said, so is the approach which is the source of disagreement?
I wouldn't say a disagreement, but a way of reporting.
Whatever it is, Ghana has debt to pay in the energy sector, and Ghana has debt to pay.
Mr. Chairman, every country has as well.
No, but specific. I'm specific. The banking sector clean up and for an energy sector debt. Now, reading through your CV, may I, Chairman, with respect, refer the nominee, you serve as director on Designate, is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, there are pensioners and the Senate are complaining. One, about investment of their money by Senate, and two, payment of lump sum, and three, computation of past credit, that the institution is not fair to them. And you know, post-retirement is the most challenging for every person in Ghana, in particular for aged persons who now have all kinds of ailments that their income are not able to support them. Has it been brought to the attention of the Senate board?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me go over your question again. One, the investment of their money at Senate, computation of past credits, and there was a third one, please.
You respond to that too as we go on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Payment of lump sum. Lump sum. You know, just to put you in context, after the passage of Act 766, the Pensions Act, there was a moratorium of 10 years, which was further extended to 5 years, where Senate commenced payment of it. There's been some number of complaints. I just want to know whether that, at that level, since you are director, whether those matters have been brought to fore and what you are doing to resolve them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, matters of pension is dear to our hearts because you know that one day you would also be in that position. And so you need to do it and do it well. Yes, it's been brought to our attention concerning the past credits. And a committee was set up and some work has been done. And Mr. Chairman, we are hoping to resolve this issue with the various unions as soon as possible. And payment of the lump sum, Mr. Chairman, you know there's a formula. There's a formula to this. And if for some reason pensioners feel they need to be shown how these things are arrived at for them to know that it is actually a formula. It's not something that we can sit and decide that this is what we are giving to them. But there's a basis for arriving at the lump sum. And we continuously engage them. When I say we, I mean SNET continuously engage them. So I believe that if there are any uncertainties in this area, I mean, we will take it up, as in SNET will take it up and make sure they explain things to them properly. And you also mentioned the investments of pensioners' money by SNET. Mr. Chairman, from 2017 to 2020, when we inherited the position as directors at SNET, we realized that, well, they had made certain investments that were not yielding enough returns as it was supposed to be. And so we helped SNET restructure their investments in a way that we believe moving forward will help them yield some form of income or interest that will benefit the pensioners. So we are still on it. I cannot say that we have concluded, but it's something ongoing, and I believe that together we can help.
I find out from the nominee, are there any new investments that you are aware of? You took part in some board meetings to make some recommendations on some new investment. Is that the case?
Mr. Chairman, I can't remember it on top of my head, but as much as possible, we look at existing investments.
You've not been in a board meeting where the board took decisions to invest? Is that why you are reporting to this committee? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm saying is that we had some existing investments, and for some we
Chairman,
needed...
my question is specific. New investment between 2017 and 2020. Were there new investments by SNET? Did you participate in any of those meetings for the purpose of recommending new investment for better investment returns? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The pensions or the monies that we receive on behalf of our people are supposed to be invested in very fruitful ventures. And so it is likely, it is possible that, yes, some form of investments were done. And so I cannot say that throughout the 4 years we did not invest in anything that will yield very good income or interest for the pensioners.
It is likely. It means that you cannot speak to that fact yourself.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So, Director, I can only know that the institution likely invested. I've taken note of it. You are Director of National Health Insurance Authority. What's the state of their financing at end of year 2020, December? National Health Insurance Authority. What's the state of their finances? Is it in coma?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as I speak to you now, I know that NHI is doing very well in terms of claims payment. They have paid claims of up to December 2020. Usually the claims are 3 to 6 months in arrears, depending on when the claims are received and processed. And so I know they are doing well. But again, I know that government is supposed to continue to assist them. And there are some outstanding liabilities that we need to defray to give to NHI.
Does the authority owe service providers?
Mr. Chairman, once an agency engages in several activities, in one way or the other, they might owe one or two suppliers. Let's say if it's a construction, until it is completed, you cannot say you wouldn't owe.
Are you able to share the level of indebtedness of the authority with us? The state of the National Health Insurance Authority indebtedness. You have an idea as director of it?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have specific figures to it, but I know that we owe them some amount of money.
Will you say substantial or is manageable? Have some bonds been issued for them to the best of your knowledge as Deputy Minister for Finance?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Last year, that's 2020, some bonds were issued to defray some of the liabilities.
Thank you,
that
Chairman. You are director of ADB too. What's the state of ADB? We hear debate of a new development bank. What's happened to ADB? What's government doing? I haven't worked as Deputy Minister
Mr. Chairman,
of Finance
government
and as
continues
director
to
of
support
ADB.
ADB, and currently ADB is on its feet and is assisting government in the agribusiness sector.
Chairman, I want to find out from the nominee, did government promise that it will make some allocation to ADB to improve their capitalization and standing in terms of liquidity? Are you aware of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, government did that through the GATS, Ghana Amalgamated Trust Fund. And so government supported ADB in that regard to boost its capitalization.
All right, that's noted. Trade facilitation, you should be interested in matters of revenue. How is revenue performing? And I just want to know from you, since you are responsible for budget, compensation as a percentage of revenue and compensation as a percentage of GDP. I've seen some worrying scenarios, including rigidities of the budget, particularly with the statutory funds. You want to share that with the committee? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think we all need to have a good discussion on revenue to compensation to revenue and then compensation to GDP, because it's something that is dear to our hearts. But I believe that when you look on the face of it, that compensation to revenue is hovering around 54%. But one thing we also fail to look at is what goes to the individual, and whether we also talk about productivity, because I believe that if we want to increase our revenues and to bring compensation to revenue down, then we need to talk about productivity, what we can do to increase productivity so that it can increase our revenue for compensation to revenue to come down. And Mr. Chairman, I think we should all be concerned about how to do it. When you look at our peers in the ECOWAS region, their compensation to revenues around 35%, and ours is around 50%. And so we need to do something about it. And what we need to do about is to help the private sector thrive. And as the private sector thrives, we will be able to generate more revenue. Once we generate more revenue, the numbers can come down. And we'll also be in a position to pay our workers better.
Chairman, I didn't study accounting, so debit the receiver. Oh, who helped her? Chairman. I want the help from the Honorable Abner, not you, Chairman, but for every debit entry,
there is a credit entry somewhere.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I serve on the Employment Committee with the Honorable Abner, and in terms of focus, she is interested in the job that she does, and particularly the work of our committee. But conspicuously lost in this year's budget statement was any indication from government on necessary adjustment to the minimum wage and to the public sector wage. Any special reason for that? It's unusual. Since 2014, 15, and 16, we've always negotiated, completed it to allow for the Ministry of Finance to plan, which has been hailed by the World Bank. I have an annual report of Ghana's expenditure plan that the World Bank reviewed from 2014, I believe, to end of 2016. There's a new publication. I haven't read that yet. Any special reason why government was conspicuously silent on wages?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, we are aware that we should always conclude negotiations by April of the current year. to take effect from the ensuing year. Mr. Chairman, we began the wage negotiation somewhere in February 2020, and then in March we witnessed the lockdown and the effects of the pandemic. And you recall that we had to come to Parliament to amend the targets that we had set for 2020. There was so much uncertainty in 2020, and coupled with the effects of the pandemic, Mr. Chairman, we could not conclude negotiations in 2020 for 2021. But as we speak, Mr. Chairman, we have engaged, we have commissioned the technical committee. They have come with reports, and government has met. The tripartite committee, I know, has met. That's the unions, employers, and governments. They have met, and I believe that they are almost at the near end of wage negotiations.
So you assure us that the tripartite is meeting to make a determination of the minimum wage? And
yes,
the public
Mr. Chairman.
sector joint negotiating committee is also meeting to look at the wages?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As we speak, I know there's a meeting of the tripartite today to conclude on the minimum wage. And I know that once they conclude on the minimum wage, the base pay will also, they will also start negotiations for the
Geneva with the committee on ILO and decent work. Ghana, you are still talking about decent, they are talking about decent wages. Ghana, you are still talking about minimum wages. When do you think we'll be there?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That is what I said, that is a conversation we should all have, that as much as possible, we together can decide to increase productivity. Once we increase productivity, I believe that the wages that we earn or the wages that we pay our people will be not just a living wage, but will be a wage that will be commensurate for
Chairman, I
work
should
done.
be ending it so that our colleagues can have a bite. But back to national health insurance, there are complaints of discriminatory payments. Discrimination in payment of service providers. You pick and choose. That's the accusation. What will you say to that charge? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a director, we do not get ourselves involved in the day-to-day running of the agency. It is up to management, to do these things. And so if now that it's been brought to my attention, I can also pass on the information to the CEO for them to look at it. But for us, we take the decisions and then management implements those decisions. So thank you for bringing this to my attention.
The board should be interested in it. And you
yes,
should
Mr.
demand
Chairman.
to know which category of persons have been paid over the years, which category have been outstanding, in order that you ensure fairness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see that you see that I should give space, so I yield.
Yes, Honorable Patrick Bama.
Thank you very much, MP. Started drinking water too early. Hey, it's too early for 2 bottles of water. Honorable nominee. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The people of Adaswase are proud of you.
Thank you.
Minister, contractors in Ghana, you are in charge of budget. Am I right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You were in charge?
Yes, I was.
You are confirming to the committee that you were in charge of budget.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, from 2017 to 2020.
That was a big portfolio. So you were in charge, and contractors were crying for payments, releases. Yes, doctors, nurses, everybody, contractors. So what has accounted for that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, consistently, government has increased the budget allocation to Ministry of Roads. and especially in years that government designated those years as year of roads. Government really increased the budget, and government made sure that what was in the budget was paid to these road contractors. Mr. Chairman, I know that there are quite a number of activities competing for this same revenue that we earn. We believe that if we continue to increase our revenues as it's supposed to, we will be in a better position to help our contractors. And again, the way road construction is, we need to start talking about very innovative ways of funding these road contracts, so that as much as possible, consistently, there will be monies in there to be paying as and when they submit their IPCs. But I know government has done very well. When you compare from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, the budget for Ministry of Roads keeps increasing. And any other support that government is able to give in that sector, government does it as well.
Oh, I can understand why Honorable Amakwata has most of his roads fixed and that of your constituency. No problem. Atiwa East and West, no problem. You are talking about funds. Do we have funds for government Agenda 111 project?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in the budget, government put in some monies for the Agenda 111.
Budget, which page? Which page?
Just a minute, please.
Minister, which page?
Mr. Chairman, page 252, government put about 4.5 billion for COVID-related expenditure, and that also includes the Agenda 111 in there. So it is part of the 4.5 billion government put in the budget. Thank you.
Minister, let me take you to the Constitution.
That should be your last question.
No, Chairman. Chairman, you are protecting my colleague, and I don't...
Honorable, you are lucky that I've overlooked about 4 questions that you have asked previously. So take your last one.
Very well. Minister, this is a general question on the central bank. I've decided to go to the Supreme Court because for years we haven't seen the budget of the Bank of Ghana. The last time we met with GMPC, transfer charges alone that the central bank took from GMPC amounted to $14.6 million. Yet they cover themselves with that independent cloak. And I think it's about time that we test the law on their activities, because you and I haven't seen the budget of the central bank. If you look at the Constitution, it talks about their functions, the functions of the governor, their biannual reports on foreign exchange receipts, and the report that the Auditor General is supposed to bring to Parliament for a debate. And also, if the Parliament per Article 184(4), Parliament shall debate the report of the Auditor General and appoint, where necessary, in the public interest, a committee to deal with any matters arising from the Auditor General's report on the central bank. What is your view on the fact that the budget of the Bank of Ghana has never been cited by the Parliament of Ghana?
Thank you very much. I think the Constitution is clear, and the Constitution has given Parliament the mandate to do that. So if for any reason Parliament wants to view the activities or the budget of Bank of Ghana, a committee can be set up to do that. But yes, respect their independence, because there are other independent institutions. And you also mentioned that the Auditor General audits the Bank of Ghana, so that if there's anything that they need to bring to your attention, we will see that in the Auditor General's reports that they submit to Parliament every year.
You are encouraging me to go to the Supreme Court. Is that okay?
Please don't answer that one. He announced that he is going to Supreme Court. You are not doing anything. Yes, Honorable Zia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations once again, Honorable Nominee.
Thank you very much, Honorable.
In your answer to an earlier question, you indicated that for the year of roads, you actually increased budgetary allocation to that sector, but that is not supported by provisions in Appendix 4 of page 224 of the 2020 budget. When you look at that appendix, for the first year of roads, the budgetary allocation was 1 million, and I think 1,201 million Ghana cedis. But for the second year of roads, strangely, the allocation is 917 million, a little bit above that. So that is a clear reduction in allocation to the second year of roads. Can you kindly clarify that? Why that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, for the first year of roads was in 2020. And in 2020, their total budget was 4.2. When I say their total budget includes goods and services compensation and capital expenditure. The actual payments years was 4.8 billion. And in 2021, their budget was 3.92. But Mr. Chairman, you would bear with me that 2021 is a very peculiar year. Right after COVID, we are now trying to recover. So every ministry, department, and agency did witness some reduction in its budget. So when you compare this to the total funding that was available for disbursement, this is a very high amount of 3.9 billion.
What you just said, unfortunately, is also not supported by the allocation to Office of Government Machinery. And I've made this point to almost every nominee in the space that came before this committee, because when you look at the allocation to Office of Government Machinery between 2020 and 2021, it increased by 504.85%. Now, when you look at it carefully, the staff strength at the Office of Government Machinery has reduced, and some of the ministries have been scraped off the office. So it's quite strange that even though you reduce the staff strength at the Office of Government Machinery, the budgetary allocation is increasing. And that is also contrary to what you just said with regards
Thank
to
you
roads.
very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is not contrary. When you compare the number of agencies that were aligned to Office of Government Machinery in 2020, and you compare same, you realize that the number of agencies aligned for 2021 has gone up. In 2020, we did not have NAPCO under Office of Government Machinery. NAPCO's budget alone is close to $1 billion. And so when you see NAPCO under Office of Government Machinery and the allocation has gone up, when you see, Office of Government Machinery's allocation going up, go into the details and look one by one. You realize that some agencies have been aligned to Office of Government Machinery. And we also have NEIP, which my friend, my brother here used to head. That one has also gone to Office of Government Machinery. Maslog has gone to Office of Government Machinery. There are a couple of things, items or agencies that have gone in there. So on the face of it, you would think that we have increased the budget allocation for Office of Government Machinery. But when you go into the details, you realize that there were some agencies that were not aligned to Office of Government Machinery in 2020, but have been aligned in 2021 as a result of the restructuring of things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I also want to find out your view on this matter. I think it's been said on different platforms that your government is a better manager of the economy. And I find that a bit contrary to some reports I read. Particularly, I looked at the Index of Economic Freedom and looked at the Global Gender Gap Index, that is issued by the World Economic Forum. And then you look at the ease of business. All these reports are saying something contrary to the assertion that you are better managers of the economy. So, for example, the Index of Economic Freedom indicates that government obtained an average score of 57.28 for the period between 2017 and 2020, and as compared to the average score of 78.63 between 2013 and 2016. Then again, when you look at the Global Gender Gap Index, you would realize that government last year obtained a rank of 107 on a score of 0.67. And that is compared to 2016 figures where the government obtained 59th on a score of 0.71, which means that under your watch, the gender disparity is increasing in terms of economic activities. And then the ease of doing business also ranking is also not looking good. How do you reconcile this with the assertion that you are better managers of the economy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, we are. We are better managers of the economy. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic hitting this country, we had stabilized the economy. Inflation was almost a single digit, and things were going well until 2020 March when the pandemic hit. And Mr. Chairman, when you look at all that my brother has raised, you realize that when the pandemic hit, things really changed. Women were more hit than men because women engaged more in economic activities like the selling of things. You know all these things that women directly were hit. So certainly, when these indicators are being taken, yes, you will see some disparities in there because the COVID-19 pandemic really affected women more than the men because women engaged more in the day-to-day economic activities directly compared to the men. And this also affected the way businesses were done. Businesses quickly had to reinvent themselves to do more of the Zooming and all the other IT technology stuff before they could even arrive at solutions or meets and all those things. So, Mr. Chairman, all these things is not as a result of, it is not anybody's fault, but the COVID pandemic hit and really changed things, and it took time for businesses to adjust. I believe that moving forward, with the preliminary assessments that we have done, I know the dynamics will change, but it will take some time because we still haven't really gotten a hold of the total effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I believe that we will get there and things will improve. Thank you.
The very last one, which is something I'm sure maybe you could take responsibility for, because for COVID, it's obvious that it's difficult to pin the effect of COVID on any individual or institution. But issues of corruption are things that I'm sure the government can take responsibility for. According to the Community Development Alliance, corrupt practices swallowed about $2.1 billion COVID cash. Now, apart from that, when you look at the 2019 Auditor General's report, the unaccounted funds from 2017 to 2019 for public boards, corporations, and other statutory institutions amounted to 20 billion cedis. Given the fact that you have responsibility over budgets, what do you propose to be the way to deal with these corrupt practices so we don't keep losing money that belongs to the state in this manner?
Thank you very much, but I disagree with the assertion that a 2.1 billion COVID cash was lost to corruption. You know, COVID and its effects, in many instances, usually with procurement, there can be exceptions when it comes to a matter of urgency or there's an emergency. And so maybe if you can be specific with the corrupt practices that is being leveled against. But I want to assure you that every money that Parliament approved for us for COVID expenditure can be accounted for, and for some it has been accounted for. In 2020, Parliament approved about 11.1 billion for us. We have spent 8.3 billion, which we have accounted for. And in 2021, in the mid-year, you would also see some level of accounting, or in the monies that were approved for us, provided we have spent those monies. So I just want to clear the air that concerning the COVID funds that Parliament approved for us, we have up-to-date reports on how we have spent the monies that were approved for us.
As a follow-up.
And then you also mentioned...
Chairman, just a follow-up. Minister Nomini, are you aware that government and the World Bank and the Article 4 revision meetings agreed to an audit of the COVID expenditure, an audit of it, arising out of some of the issues that the Honorable Sosu have raised?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, consistently, every year, the Auditor General audits all ministries, departments, and agencies. So if for any reason a special fund has been set and they want to audit these funds, I think it is in the right direction that we do all these things to make sure that we followed protocols and everything was done right. So that does not cause any problem for IMF and government to agree that they want to go ahead and audit the COVID funds. I think it's in line with proper accountability and transparency.
So the follow-up that I was, just to clarify the point that according to the Corruption Risk report by the Community Development Alliance, they made references to procurement breaches. So it's more of monies lost as a result of procurement breaches.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with some of these things, you look at the procurement law, you go to the procurement law, were there breaches and under what conditions were these procurements made? And so, yes, we make the rules, but at the same time, we also need to look at things. We always make exceptions in these rules, and sometimes when you make exceptions in some situations like the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's still within the law, I think you haven't dealt or indulged in any corrupt practices. Thank you.
Very well. Yes, Ms. Ejare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Government lately is telling us that it wants to open a development bank in Ghana. Meanwhile, government owns a lot of banks in Ghana that it can restructure to serve the same purpose. Why is it a need to have a new development bank altogether?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as part of revitalizing the economy as a result of the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, government is doing a couple of things. And in that is the National Development Bank. Mr. Chairman, the National Development Bank is not a regular bank or the regular retail banks that we have in the system. Government is doing everything possible to support NIB, ADB, to make sure the purpose for which they were set up is realized. But this National Development Bank is going to act as a bank to give capital to these commercial banks. It is not the usual commercial banks that you see around, but it's going to give funding give funding to these banks to enable them carry out their activities at a minimum cost. So this is not the regular banking that we know, but it's rather going to strengthen and give access to capital for these banks to thrive.
That's why I was thinking one could be restructured to serve the purpose. Anyways, now to bread and butter issues. No, this is more bread and butter, straight bread and butter. My checks at the Ministry of Finance indicate that you are also responsible for school feeding. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And school feeding is usually in the news for all the bad reasons, which include non-payment of caterers not cooking because the money is not enough, not be paid on time, they owe people and all of that stuff. We know that school feeding actually helps children to go to school. It is a great incentive for especially people in the rural communities, where you think that in the rural communities there are a lot of food. It's not correct. In the rural communities, people find food difficult, when especially we are in the lean season and things like that. And the school feeding program is a great motivation why children go to school. What is the state of school feeding now?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I can't agree with my colleague more because I also have school feeding in my area, and I have seen how the numbers have gone up because we have increased the number of school feeding in the Tiwa East constituency. And I share your plight. It is something that the current gender minister has formed an interministerial committee to look at the issues at the school feeding and come up with recommendations that we believe will help reduce issues that we have at school feeding. One, you mentioned non-caterer payments, and some of these things, Mr. Chairman, it is difficult, but I believe that once we conclude on these audits, the recommendations will come out, and then we will work with the recommendations, and I believe that we will find a solution to the current situation at the school feeding secretariat or school feeding program. But I must say that government has done very well for the school feeding program, because in 2016 we had about 1.6 million students or pupils on the school feeding program. We have close to 3.4 million children on the school feeding program, and government knows the importance of the school feeding program, and so we'll do everything possible to make sure that this program succeeds. And for us, from the Ministry of Finance, we also make sure that we give the right budgetary allocation to enable the school feeding also fulfill its mandate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. But 3.4 and still counting, because there are a lot of communities in need of school feeding program. I take you to your CV. It is not numbered, so the portion that deals with your leadership positions, Director SNIT, Director National Health Insurance Authority. So item 5. You seem to be the answer to the plight of private health providers. they contend that, as you have said here, that national health insurance is doing well because it is only in 6 months arrears. Very beautiful. But when you go to SNIT, where you are also a director, they are supposed to pay every 30 days. But it gets to a point that the national health insurance owe them 6 months. They also owe SNIT 6 months, and they are paying penalty on it. What can you do to reconcile this so that these health service providers are not overburdened as a result of delayed payment from national health insurance? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we also need to look at the processes for which they submit their claims. And because before SNIT works and pays for these things, you need to submit the claims. And I must be honest with you, sometimes, before NHIL works on these things, they need to submit the claims. Sometimes it's difficult because they don't have any claims from these hospitals. It takes quite some time for them to raise these claims. But when they come in, they have processing centers where they fast-track these claims. And like you mentioned, it's become a problem because SNIT also will have to charge penalties for late payment of their SNIT benefits. So it is something we will look into. But I believe that consistently, this NHI is doing well, and provided the claims are submitted, they are paid. I know that currently they are working on January, February claims, and I will entreat them to pay more attention to the private providers since they also have to pay SNIT, their workers' SNIT benefits. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That will be all for her. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Ibiama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Honorable nominee. I first want to ask about taxation. During the first term of President Akufo-Addo, a number of taxes were removed. New ones have been introduced. What's your general comment on this situation?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It is true that in the first term of the President, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, we said we were moving from taxation to production. Mr. Chairman, we did, and we saw some results. Mr. Chairman, in 2020, we all know the effects of the COVID pandemic. We had to come to Parliament to revise our revenue numbers by 13.1 billion, and rather increase our expenditures by 11.1 billion. And in doing that, we had a gap of about close to 25 billion to fill. The COVID hasn't left us yet. We are still trying to assess the full effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. But in order for government to be able to continue with its programs and policies, and also take on the burden of the COVID-19 expenditures that it has to incur because the COVID hasn't left us, government had to do this by seeking our permission for us to share in the burden of raising some amount of revenue to help government attend to these very important policies and programs in its budget. And I believe some of them, we mentioned that it is subject to review after a period of time. But we are happy to continue to engage all of us to see how best we can all support government to mobilize revenue to address the situation that we currently have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, my next question will be on the efforts your ministry has made towards addressing this issue of ghost names on our payroll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman, in the beginning, we were asked about our compensation to revenue. And I talked about increasing our productivity level. But there are some things that we believe that we can also do to reduce the expenditure. And so that is why the ministry is or has worked on a system called the Human Resource Management and Information System. This system is such that until your biometric data and details have been taken and put on the system, you cannot be said to be a government worker who would receive pay. So this has reduced drastically the names of those who are not supposed to be there but have found their way there. And again, there's a system where we check supervisors, validate employees at their various places of work every month before payment is done. So this, with some of the work that the Auditor General also did, has really supported and reduced some or eliminated some of the ghost names that we find. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You use the word drastically. Kindly explain. What percentage have you taken out on the payroll? When you say drastically, if you have given us some numbers or percentages to judge how drastic it is.
Mr. Chairman, we have seen some levels of efficiency in there, and the numbers on these so-called names have gone down, but I can't give an exact percentage. So maybe let me say that I take out the drastic and say that we have seen some drop in that area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Related to this, how do you respond to, maybe I would say rumors, that there will be no salary increase for the next 3 years?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, that is absolutely false. And that is why I shared with the committee what the Tripartite Committee is doing. The Tripartite Committee is the committee that is supposed to come up with the minimum wage once the minimum wage is announced, and then we will look at the base pay. And consistently, government shares the plight of workers, and government knows that we will have to see some adjustments in our wages and salaries. And so I believe that before the end of June, we should see us completing or concluding the minimum wage and, God willing, the base pay as well. So it is not true that we are freezing wage levels for the next 3 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, who is not my friend, I want us to have a conversation that the chairman wanted to perhaps have yesterday about borrowing and how we have all contributed to the understanding of borrowing, the general public understanding of borrowing. Mr. Chairman, the former president was berated for borrowing so much, former President John Dramani Mahama, by the current vice president, that at a point he had to respond by saying, we have not borrowed to drink or make merry. And I have a publication by my journal line 7 years ago that reads in part, contrary to Dr. Mahmoud Baume's recent red flag about the country's rising debt situation, President Mahama has said it is necessary for the state to keep borrowing for key infrastructural developments. We did not borrow to drink or to eat. We borrowed to bring facilities such as electricity and water to the people of Ghana. And then it goes on to even list some of the projects in many parts of the country. Now, you are also quoted recently to have said on an Accra-based Class FM that, quote, if you are borrowing for things that can pay for itself, in the end, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong, unquote. Well, it's not just you who has come around to this point. The vice president himself, who was leading the chorus, has this to say: we will continue to borrow. Dr. Baumia. Now, the part of the story says He says, quote, I know that the GDP ratio has gone up to 68.9%. And mind you, at the time he was criticizing, it was less than 40%. And I have heard the IMF too, and what they are saying. So we can look at who is projecting what. But if you look at a country like Japan, its debt to GDP is 237%. Italy is 135%. Singapore is 126. So will you, for instance, say Japan is epic, unquote? So making justification for why we have to continue borrowing. Now, the question is, Honorable Nominee, why do we contribute to this state of affairs where borrowing seems to be very, very offensive to the general public, only for us to come around when we are at the helm of affairs, where we need the resources to provide the things that should be provided, we then admit that it is not wrong after all to borrow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me use the 2021 budget as an example. We came to Parliament for Parliament to approve this budget for us. We told Parliament our expenditures was 110 billion. Our revenue, 72.5 billion. So there's a gap. And in that gap, you will have to fill it to enable you meet your expenditure. When you look in there, in the expenditure item, these are things that you need to do to run your country. And so there are two ways. You raise your own revenue or additional revenue through taxes, or you find other innovative ways of filling the gap. And so you borrow, and sometimes you also use tax to raise that.
Is that, sorry, Mr. Chairman, is that like reducing governance to just borrowing and taxation?
It is not reducing governance to just borrowing and taxation. But if you can also bear with me, that you need to continue with the free SHS. You need to continue with the road expansion. You need to continue with the Ghana Cares. You need to continue with the infrastructure that you want to see your people have. And so in this situation, what do? You try as much as possible to borrow amounts that you believe will serve your interests. And whilst borrowing, you need to check to see whether you'll be in a position to service these debts and what the debts is going to, the borrowings are going to be used for. Are they going to be used for items that can best tomorrow pay for itself or not? So you look at all these things before you take the decision to borrow. And we don't borrow in isolation. We always bring it to Parliament. We discuss with Parliament. Parliament approves before we go ahead and do that.
Well, the Honourable Nominee missed my sarcasm when I referred to reducing governance to just borrowing and taxation, because that was the accusation then. But I understand. I just hope that the understanding of the purpose for borrowing, as displayed by you, will continue even if you are not in government someday. But still on borrowing, I have with me the 2019 Consolidated Fund report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of Ghana General Government for the financial year ended 31st December 2019. And on page 9, the Auditor General makes some very interesting, findings. It says avoidable penalty and commitment fees payment on loans. 12. We noted that Government of Ghana continued to incur high cost on penalties and commitment fees, and in 2019 incurred 5,226,700 605.12 and 33 million Ghana cedis, 68,022.15 cedis as penalties and commitment fees respectively. We reiterate our earlier recommendation for effective monitoring and processing payment ahead of their respective maturity dates. So the burden is not even the debt that has to be paid and the interest that has to be paid, but like the Controller and Accountant General determines, avoidable penalty and commitment fees payment. So we make our bad situation worse by just not monitoring when we are supposed to utilize, some of these loans that we take or make payments of interest. Why is that the case? And what is the ministry doing? And if you are approved, maybe you will continue to do, if there's anything being done, to ensure that this state of affairs does not become the status quo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first and foremost, we will take into consideration the recommendations of the Auditor General, and it will act as a guiding step, for us to reduce some of these things. And again, with a commitment fee, sometimes it comes with a loan that you need to fulfill some conditions, and sometimes some of the conditions they require may not be that favorable. So whilst trying to renegotiate those conditions, and sometimes you incur some of these debts. But I will take the recommendations of the Auditor General and also see to it that we reduce delays in payments of some of these things. And when negotiating these loans too, we need to ask for conditions that we believe can best serve our purpose, so that when we have to deliver, we'll deliver on time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We should. 33 million Ghana cedis plus 5 million Ghana cedis, just because we couldn't do things on time, are needless, burdens we have to add to our already existing burden of debts we have to pay. But finally, you were on the board of ADB, right? Agricultural Development Bank, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I confirmed it earlier.
Okay. So before perhaps your appointment, there was this issue involving a company owned by McDan Group of Companies, where the company had a supply contract with Cocoa Board and was advanced a loan of 10.45 million Ghana cedis to carry out that supply contract. The minority at the time raised issues with the fact that this was done in the absence of a board for the ADB. How has your board treated this issue since your assumption of office?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, before I got in, I'm happy you said this happened behind us. But before we got in there was an existing board. But I can tell you that as we speak, this has been rectified, and I can say that for a fact that the amounts have been paid. But that is all I can say, because I wasn't at that time part of the board. But I know that as we speak, this 10.1 million has been paid back.
Rectified. How was it rectified, and what was it rectified?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have those details, because you yourself alluded to the fact that I wasn't part of the board. But I know that this has been cleared, so I can take the details and furnish you accordingly.
But you said has been paid. Is that not the rectification? Is that what you mean by has been rectified?
Yes. He's asking how it was done, and I'm telling him I don't have those details. But what I know is that it's been paid. Yes. Thank you.
Very well. Nothing else there. Yes, leader.
Chairman, we should be winding up on our colleague. But back to Honorable Suhine, and to paraphrase your word, Honorable Abna, there is nothing wrong. Have you now accepted that there is nothing wrong with borrowing based on the Suhini's submission?
Mr. Chairman, it's a quote that is being alluded to me, but what I'm saying is that
Chairman,
when you look at the kind of budget that
these
we
words are not mine. I record you.
said
You
a
said,
quote.
yes, from you. You use it today. And in fact, to add you even added, it is nobody's fault. Unquote. So is it now somebody's fault to
No,
borrow?
Mr. Chairman, I gave a premise.
So we hear you. So
I
based on the Honorable Suhini's submission, borrowing, President Mahama borrowed, NDC borrowed, Nana Danko has borrowed. On record, he has borrowed even more, added over 164 billion to the public debt. Is there anything wrong with it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't want to go into so much details, but it is not that we have added 164 billion to the public debt. There's the actual debts that we have accumulated, and then there's also the exchange rate losses that is in there. But like I said, I don't want to go into that. But all I'm saying is that when you manage the kind of economy that we have, where we manage a deficit economy because our expenditures are always more than our revenues, clearly you will need to fill in that gap. And in filling in that gap, you have options. And so sometimes you weigh the options and see what best suits.
Are the options anybody's fault? Chairman, maybe let me put you in context. I'm using your words and appreciate the issue that Honorable Suhini raised. For instance, President Mahama and the NDC at end of year 2016, in terms of annual budget funding amount and earnings from oil revenue, was below 360 million US dollars. You are earning close to 1 billion US dollars. To whom much is given, much is to be expected. Yet you say that he didn't do enough with $260 million. So back to your theory, it is nobody's fault. If oil prices were declining, just like today, you are attributing it to COVID, and he attributed it to unstable international economic order. Was it personal to him, or there were existential external factors that compelled him to take those positions? Where do you stand, the Honorable Abner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the effects of COVID, you can't compare it to any other world economic crisis prior to 2017. And we are still, not just Ghana, the whole world is still assessing the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this one is incomparable, I must state. But what we are saying is that we weigh the options, which ones best suits our needs, what we have to do, and then we go in for, for what we have to go in for to settle the deficits.
No, so I'm still on your theory of it's nobody's fault. When prices of gold decline, prices of cocoa is not favorable, it will affect budget projections. You are a key budget officer. If you made projections and against revenue, revenues necessarily will not live up to expectation because of those intervening factors. COVID is the same intervening factor. And I say to your theory, is it somebody's fault?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I also said that the effects of COVID is incomparable. So when you want to put those two side by side, we know the effects of a fall in prices of gold,
but
prices
changes
of oil.
in international economic conditions can also be a factor. Do you admit to that?
It can be a
and
factor,
that can affect
but the
revenue.
weight
No, I'm not contesting you on weight. In fact, if you want, I'll share even figures with you. Like when you kept emphasizing the effects of women, I've just read a publication that they lost about 800 million. What I don't know is, I've forgotten the sign, whether it was billion or millions, but there's a publication detailed on the impact of COVID on women, and they quote some loss of 800 billion US dollars. So I'm not contesting you on that. I'm simply saying that can your fiscals suffer as a result of unfavorable international economic conditions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, but there are extent to which these things can happen. Thank you.
Your government promised to end the suffering. Have suffering ended in Ghana?
Mr. Chairman, this question is relative. Yes.
Oh, Chairman, I'm quoting from the MPP manifesto of 2016. Those are not my words. Suffering of teachers, suffering of farmers, suffering of nurses.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In this regard,
have you helped the minister to help the suffering?
Our government has helped a lot to alleviate
Do you know the price of steel iron today, the price of cement?
Mr. Chairman,
to what it was in 2016?
Yes, but Mr. Chairman, before I answer this one, the government has helped a lot in this regard with very good intervention policies like the Planting for Food and Jobs, the 1D, 1F, and all these things we believe has helped in a way, to alleviate the plight of our people. And when you look at the teachers, the nurses, what government has done in terms of recruitment, in terms of paying the arrears. Government has done a lot in this regard. And I believe that this has gone a long way to alleviate the problems in that sector. And the second question?
Chairman, the second question, Chairman, is for her if she does succeed. It's a matter of public concern. Contracts are awarded to service providers. Contracts are awarded to road contractors. Probably at the time that the contract was awarded, he paid 20 cedis for cement. Today, the same contractor is paying 50 cedis for a bag of cement. When he paid 20 cedis, iron rods was particularly maybe 3,500. Today, he's paying 5,500 for the same iron. The Ministry of Finance, with delayed payment, will you adjust the price fluctuation element in the computation of this contract in order to save the contractors? Will you be for that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is a decision that the Honorable Minister will have to take. And
what would be your advice assisting him? What would be your advice?
Mr. Chairman, per the law, I know that you can vary these things up to 10%. Beyond that, you will need to sit and then look at the whole...
the effect of your taxes, is it 10%? If iron rods was selling at 3,000, it's now 5,000, is it 10%? And then cement was 30 cedis and is now more than that. Is it 10%?
Mr. Chairman, that is what the law says.
So I'm saying the law and then the suffocation of Ghanaian businesses. And then, Chairman, I end with this. I think that probably, are you the Deputy Minister who served on the Ghana Exim Bank? Do you play a role there?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Ghana Exim is not under your watch. Now, Chairman, I end with it. Delayed payments by government. You see, the contractor goes to borrow money at 23% interest per annum. He executes the work. He is not paid for 2 years, sometimes 18 to 24 months. The interest accumulates on it. So you only pay contractors to service banks. And that is affecting the growth of the Ghanaian private sector and entrepreneurs in that sector. And Chairman, I'm not raising this for the purpose of our colleague, but just for us to have a national conversation on it. In Rwanda, if there is no budget for any project, there is no commencement of work on it in Rwanda. And additionally, if work commences on a project, it must see completion. In South Africa, a contractor's IPC or bill cannot be outstanding for more than 6 months. Your ministry, you still have outstanding obligations 2016, 2017, probably even much earlier. What do you think we can do as a country to improve upon this. This is not personal to you. I'm Chairman, I'm done. But I just think that as a country, we are doing a lot of disservice to our private sector and to the entrepreneurial class of our country. He initiates, he goes to borrow, he undertakes the project really never gets completed, and then Minister of Finance, and Chairman, you know I've had Minister of Finance friends. Their first intuitive answer, we don't have money, we don't have money. Are you also like that?
If you don't have money, will you say it or not?
Anyway, Chairman, I'm done. Thank you. And congrats to the Honorable Abner.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Member, I should not be asking you a question, but it's a matter of interest to all of us. Honorable Bodo and Honorable Richard Kwashiga went to court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the District Assembly's Common Fund is a constitutional creation. So any deductions based on legislation of any kind, apart from an amendment, is unconstitutional. Are you aware of that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So I hope that during the consideration of the you're not going to introduce anything based on any legislation, youth employment or anything which is not an amendment to the Constitution. I hope not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the budget was passed, the 2021 budget was passed with some alignments being made to the District Assembly Common Fund. And we came under the PFM law, the government and Section 52, which also says that government can align its macro-fiscal targets to earmarked funds or statutory funds. Mr. Chairman, we all understand that 2021 is a peculiar year. We are now recovering from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and government still has to fund school feeding. And so I take, we aligned an amount of 489 to the District Assembly Common Fund for school feeding. This is something that we have done before. In 2016, the full amount of school feeding was aligned. In 2018, we aligned parts. In 2019, we did not, I think, and then in 2020, we did align a certain portion. But Mr. Chairman, this is as a...
In 2021, are you aligning or you are not aligning?
I mentioned that we have aligned a portion of that as well.
491, that's
481, 489, yes.
I'm just stating it. So you see, instead of budgeting for school feeding, you are feeding on the objection Chairman is raising. You are realigning and cutting off what should ordinarily go to the district assemblies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In computing the formula, what is supposed to go to the assemblies have not been touched. It is still the same. The 50.74% of the funds should go to the assembly, and that remains so, I believe.
Honorable Minister, we are not arguing with what is stated in the law. We are saying that Parliament passed the law. We made an error. The Supreme Court has corrected us, for which reason we cannot perpetuate that error. Says that the law which says that any law which is in conflict with the PFM or whatever law, PFM law, the PFM law should have priority. That interpretation does not affect the Constitution. The 5% only of national revenue which should go to the district assemblies. And I'm particular about this because you all know that for all the MPs, for all MPs, that is the only life we have the district assemblies, the little 5% of that money that is reserved for MPs, it does more than the 95 or so that is reserved for the
Mr. Chairman,
so
sorry.
Without us, without that money, no MP will come back. Without that small portion, 70,000 a quarter, and things, without that, no MP will come back here. So if you touch that one, please be.
Mr. Chairman, that hasn't been touched. I must state it on record that hasn't been touched.
Very well.
Thank you.
This one is not a question. This is just to alert you that when we approve you and you are coming to the House, go however, whatever you have taken out of the common fund, restore it. And let us decide with the administrator whether we'll give you anything. That is part of the formula. On that note, I congratulate you on your for appearing before us. You will hear from us later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very grateful to the committee and to the President and my minister as well. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, you're discharged. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.